The concert hall buzzed with excited chatter as people found their seats. Marcus Chen adjusted his bow tie for the third time, glancing at his reflection in the dressing room mirror. At 42 years old, he had performed in over 60 countries and won every major piano competition worth winning. Tonight was just another show in another city, another chance to display his technical mastery to an audience that would applaud politely and forget him by morning. His manager knocked on the door. 5 minutes. Marcus. The hall is completely sold out. Marcus nodded without much enthusiasm. He had been feeling this way for months now, maybe even years. The passion that once drove him to practice 12 hours a day had faded into routine. He played the notes perfectly because his fingers knew them by heart, but his heart had stopped speaking through the music long ago. As he walked toward the stage, he passed through the corridor where a small crowd had gathered for the meet and greet. Session scheduled after the performance. His eyes swept over the faces without really seeing them until they landed on a young girl standing slightly apart from the others. She was perhaps 12 or 13 years old, with dark skin and hair pulled back in neat braids. She wore a simple blue dress that looked carefully pressed, and she held a white cane in her right hand. But what caught Marcus's attention was the way she stood. While everyone else faced the stage door where he would eventually emerge, she had positioned herself near the wall, her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The piano tuner was making final adjustments on stage, and the faint notes drifted through the building. The girl's face transformed with each sound. Her expression showed pure joy mixed with deep concentration, as if she was seeing colors in those notes that others couldn't perceive. Marcus found himself pausing, watching her. In that moment, she seemed to hear music the way he used to hear it. Back when he was a child, discovering the piano for the first time in his grandmother's living room, his manager touched his elbow. "Marcus, we need to go." He shook himself from the thought and continued to the stage. The performance began exactly as planned. His fingers flew across the keys with mechanical precision, executing every difficult passage flawlessly. The audience applauded at all the right moments. Everything was perfect, and yet everything felt empty. During the intermission, Marcus returned to his dressing room and found himself thinking about the blind girl again. There was something about the way she had listened to those random piano notes, something that reminded him of what he had lost. The second half of the concert went much like the first. When he played the final chord of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, No. 2, the audience rose to their feet. He bowed mechanically, smiled his practiced smile, and left the stage. The meet and greet session began 30 minutes later. People lined up with programs to sign, phones ready for selfies, and rehearsed compliments about his technique. Marcus signed autographs and posed for pictures with the same professional detachment he brought to everything else these days. Then the blind girl appeared in line with an older woman who Marcus assumed was her mother or grandmother. The woman looked tired but proud, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. When they reached him, the girl spoke first. "Mr. Chen, my name is Maya Thompson. I've listened to all your recordings, every single one." Her voice carried genuine admiration, but also something else, something that sounded like understanding. Marcus felt uncomfortable under her sightless gaze, as if she could somehow see through his famous exterior to the hollow place inside. "Thank you," he said automatically. "That's very kind." Maya hesitated, then continued. "I play piano too. I've been learning for 6 years now." "That's wonderful," Marcus replied, his tone suggesting the conversation should end there. He had heard this many times before, children telling him they played piano. Hoping for encouragement or advice he no longer felt qualified to give. But Maya persisted. "Could I play something for you someday? My teacher says I have potential, but I want to know what a real pianist thinks." The grandmother squeezed Maya's shoulder gently, a subtle warning not to push too hard. Marcus saw the hope in the old woman's eyes and the determination in Maya's posture. He should have said yes. He should have encouraged this child who clearly loved music, but the words that came out of his mouth surprised even himself. "Play for fun," he said, not unkindly, but with clear dismissal. "Enjoy the piano as a hobby. The professional world is difficult, especially for someone with your ... challenges. The moment the words left his lips, he regretted them. Maya's face fell, and her grandmother's expression shifted from hope to disappointment. But Marcus had already turned to the next person in line, effectively ending the conversation. He didn't see Maya's hands clench around her cane. He didn't see the way her jaw set with determination. He didn't see her grandmother lean down and whisper something in her ear that made her straighten her shoulders. As they walked away, Maya spoke quietly. "Grandma Rose, I'm going to show him. I'm going to prove that I can do more than play for fun." Rose Thompson looked at her granddaughter's face and recognized that stubborn expression. It was the same look Maya's mother had worn before she passed away 3 years ago. Leaving Rose to raise this remarkable child alone. "I know you will, baby," Rose said softly. "I know you will." Marcus watched them leave from the corner of his eye, feeling an uncomfortable twist in his chest. He pushed the feeling away and continued signing autographs, but Maya's face stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. That night, alone in his hotel room, Marcus sat at the window, looking out at the city lights. He thought about the blind girl who listened to music like she could see God in it. He thought about his own playing, technically perfect, but emotionally dead. For the first time in years, Marcus Chen wondered if he had made a terrible mistake, not just tonight with his dismissive words, but somewhere along the way, when he stopped playing with his heart and started playing only with his hands. He didn't know it yet, but that brief encounter would change everything. The blind girl named Maya Thompson was about to teach the famous pianist a lesson about music, about passion, and about the incredible gift that comes not from perfect technique, but from a soul that refuses to be silent. Maya Thompson walked through the front door of her grandmother's small house, her cane tapping familiar patterns on the wooden floor. She moved through the space with the confidence of someone who had memorized every corner, every piece of furniture, every creaky board. The old upright piano stood against the wall in the living room, its keys worn smooth by decades of use. It had belonged to Maya's mother, who had played in church every Sunday until the car accident that took her life. Now it belonged to Maya, and she treated it like a sacred treasure. Rose watched her granddaughter head straight for the piano bench without saying a word. She knew that look. Maya was hurt by the famous pianist's words, but hurt in Maya's world never led to tears or giving up. It led to determination that bordered on fierce. "You want some hot chocolate before bed?" Rose asked gently. "Maybe later," Grandma Maya replied, already positioning her hands over the keys. "I need to practice." "Baby, it's almost 10 o'clock. You've got school tomorrow, just one piece, please." Rose sighed but nodded, then remembered Maya couldn't see the gesture. One piece. Then bed. Maya's fingers found the keys and began to play. The music that filled the small house was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece that required not just technical skill but deep emotional understanding. Rose lowered herself into her worn armchair and closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. 3 years ago, when Maya's mother died, everyone worried about how the blind 12-year-old would cope with such devastating loss. But Maya had gone to the piano and played for 6 hours straight, crying while her fingers found solace in melodies that words couldn't express. That was when Rose truly understood that music wasn't just something Maya did. It was how she breathed, how she understood the world, how she survived. The nocturne ended, and silence fell over the room. Maya sat perfectly still, her hands resting on the keys. "What did he mean, Grandma?" she asked quietly. "About my challenges." Rose's heart ached. "Baby, some people can't see past what's on the outside. They look at you and see someone who's blind, and they think that limits what you can do. But I can play. You know I can play. Mrs. Patterson says I'm her best student." "I know, sweetheart. And Mrs. Patterson is right." Maya turned on the bench to face where her grandmother sat. "When I was listening to Mr. Chen play tonight, something felt wrong. All the notes were perfect, but it felt cold. Like he was playing from memory instead of from his heart." "Is that crazy?" Rose leaned forward, surprised by her granddaughter's insight. "No, baby. That's not crazy at all. That's you hearing what others miss." I want to show him that being blind doesn't mean I can't be a real pianist. I want him to hear me play and know that he was wrong. And how do you plan to do that? Maya's face set with determination. Mrs. Patterson told me about the Youth International Piano Competition next month. She said I should enter, but I wasn't sure I was ready. Now I know I have to do it. Rose felt a flutter of worry. The Youth International Piano Competition was prestigious and highly competitive. Students came from all over the country, many of them trained at expensive music academies. Maya had learned from Mrs. Patterson, a retired piano teacher who charged almost nothing because she believed in Maya's gift. That's a big competition, Maya, are you sure? Mr. Chen is going to be one of the judges. Mrs. Patterson mentioned it tonight. She said he judges competitions between his concert tours. Now, Rose understood. This wasn't just about proving herself. This was about proving herself to the man who had dismissed her. Even if you enter, baby, there's no guarantee you'll get to play for him. Hundreds of kids will compete. Then I'll practice harder than hundreds of kids. I'll practice until my fingers know every note so perfectly that even someone who has forgotten how to feel music will feel mine. Rose saw the fire in her granddaughter's eyes and knew there was no point in arguing. When Maya set her mind on something, she became unstoppable. All right, Rose said. We'll call Mrs. Patterson tomorrow and talk about entering, but now you need to get some sleep. Maya smiled, her first real smile since leaving the concert hall. She stood up, grabbed her cane, and made her way to her bedroom with practiced ease. After Maya went to bed, Rose sat alone in the living room, worrying about the money. The competition required a registration fee, and participants needed to perform in formal concert attire. Money was always tight. Rose worked 2 jobs, one at the grocery store and another cleaning offices at night, just to keep them afloat. Maya's mother had left a small insurance policy, but Rose had been saving that for Maya's education. But as she sat there in the quiet house, Rose remembered something her daughter used to say. Mama, when God puts a gift in someone, He makes a way for that gift to shine. Maya had a gift. Rose would find a way. The next morning, Maya called Mrs. Patterson before school. The elderly piano teacher lived just 3 blocks away, in a house filled with photographs of students who had gone on to study music in colleges across the country. Mrs. Patterson, I want to enter the Youth International Piano Competition, Maya announced as soon as her teacher answered the phone. There was a pause on the other end. Maya, that's wonderful, but that competition is very advanced. Are you sure you're ready? I have 4 weeks to prepare. If I practice 4 hours every day after school and 6 hours on weekends, that's 168 hours of practice. That's enough time, isn't it? Mrs. Patterson chuckled at Maya's mathematical precision. Time isn't everything, dear, but your determination counts for a lot. What made you decide to enter? Maya hesitated, then told her teacher about the encounter with Marcus Chen. She described his dismissive words, the way he had suggested she play only for fun, as if her blindness automatically disqualified her from serious consideration. When Maya finished, Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried a mixture of anger and fierce pride. That man has forgotten what music is truly about, she said. He's technically brilliant, yes, but I've heard him play recently. There's no soul left in it. Perhaps you're exactly what he needs to hear. You really think I can do this? Maya, I've been teaching piano for 43 years. I've had students who went to Juilliard who now play in orchestras around the world, and I'm telling you that you have something special. Your blindness doesn't limit you. If anything, it makes you hear things in the music that others miss. You feel the spaces between the notes. You understand the silence that makes the sound meaningful. Maya's grip tightened on the phone. So you'll help me prepare. We'll work together every single day. I'll rearrange my schedule. But Maya, you need to understand something. This competition is incredibly difficult. Even if you play brilliantly, the judges might have biases. Some people still can't see past disabilities, I know, but I have to try. Then we'll make sure that when you sit down at that piano, there won't be a single person in that room who can dismiss what you do. We'll make them listen. We'll make them feel, and we'll remind a certain famous pianist what real music sounds like." Maya hung up the phone, feeling lighter than she had since the concert. She had a goal now, a purpose. Marcus Chen had meant to discourage her, but instead, he had lit a fire that wouldn't be easily extinguished. That afternoon, Maya went to Mrs. Patterson's house for the first of many intensive practice sessions. The elderly teacher had selected 3 pieces for the competition, each one chosen to showcase different aspects of Maya's abilities. As Maya's fingers moved across the keys, Mrs. Patterson listened with her eyes closed, the way she always did when she wanted to truly hear what a student was playing. And what she heard made her smile. Maya had always been talented, but something had changed. There was a new intensity in her playing, a determination that translated into every phrase, every dynamic shift, every carefully shaped melody. Marcus Chen had no idea what he had set in motion with his careless words. He had dismissed a blind girl, never imagining that she would take his dismissal and transform it into fuel for something remarkable. He didn't know that for weeks from now, he would sit in a judge's chair and hear something that would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about music. The stage was set. The challenge was accepted, and Maya Thompson was ready to show the world that true talent sees with the heart, not with the eyes. The weeks that followed were the most intense of Maya's young life. Every day after school, she walked the 3 blocks to Mrs. Patterson's house, her cane tapping a rhythm that matched her eager heartbeat. Every day, she sat at the old Steinway grand piano in Mrs. Patterson's music room and poured her soul into the keys. Mrs. Patterson had chosen 3 pieces for the competition, each one carefully selected to showcase different aspects of Maya's abilities. The first was Bach's Prelude and Fugue in C major, a piece that would demonstrate her technical precision and understanding of complex musical architecture. The second was Debussy's Clair de Lune, which would highlight her sensitivity and ability to create atmosphere. The third was Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a dramatic and powerful piece that would prove she could handle the emotional depth required of serious pianists. "Your fingers know the notes," Mrs. Patterson said on the second week of practice. "Now we need to make sure your heart speaks through every measure. When you play Bach, I want to hear mathematics become poetry. When you play Debussy, I want to see moonlight even though I'm sitting in this dusty old music room. And when you play Rachmaninoff, I want to feel the thunder and the sorrow and the triumph all at once." Maya nodded, understanding exactly what her teacher meant. This was the difference between playing correctly and playing meaningfully, and it was the difference she had sensed missing in Marcus Chen's performance. At home, Rose watched her granddaughter practice for hours each evening. She saw Maya's fingers moving across the worn keys of their old upright piano, sometimes with frustration when a passage didn't flow the way she wanted, sometimes with pure joy when everything came together perfectly. Rose also saw the toll the intensive practice was taking. Maya's schoolwork began to slip. Her teachers sent notes home expressing concern. She stopped spending time with the few friends who had always treated her blindness as irrelevant. Every spare moment was dedicated to the piano. One evening, Rose found Maya still practicing at 11 o'clock at night, long after she should have been in bed. "Baby, you need to rest," Rose said gently, touching Maya's shoulder. "I can't, Grandma. There are only 9 days left until the competition. This section of the Rachmaninoff still isn't right. My left hand is rushing the tempo. Maya, you're exhausted. Your body needs sleep to perform well." Maya's hands fell from the keys. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I get there and embarrass myself? What if Mr. Chen was right and I'm just fooling myself?" Rose sat down on the piano bench beside her granddaughter. She had been waiting for this moment, knowing it would come. Doubt always arrived right before something important. "Let me tell you something about your mother," Rose began. "When she was about your age, she entered a singing competition at church. She practiced for weeks, just like you're doing now. The night before the competition, she came to me crying, saying she couldn't do it. That her voice wasn't good enough, that she would embarrass the family. What did you tell her?" "I told her that fear was just proof that she cared about what she was doing, and I told her that the only way to fail was not to try. She sang the next day, and she won. But, you know what she told me afterward? She said winning wasn't the important part. The important part was that she faced her fear and didn't let it stop her. Maya was quiet for a long moment. I miss her, Grandma. I know, baby, I miss her too. But she's with you every time you sit at this piano. This was her piano, remember? Her hands touched these same keys. Her heart spoke through these same notes. And now you're carrying on what she started. Maya reached out and found her grandmother's hand. Do you really think I can do this? I think you can do anything you set your mind to. But more importantly, I think you already know you can do this. That's why you're so scared. Because deep down, you believe in yourself, and that's terrifying. Maya smiled through the tears that had started to form. When did you get so wise? Raising your mother taught me a lot. Raising you is teaching me even more. They sat together at the piano for a few more minutes, not playing, just being present in the moment. Then Rose guided Maya to bed, knowing that rest was just as important as practice. Meanwhile, across the city in a luxury hotel suite, Marcus Chen was preparing for his role as a judge in the Youth International Piano Competition. He had judged dozens of competitions over the years, and they had all begun to blur together. Young pianists playing the same pieces, making the same mistakes, displaying the same nervous energy. His manager had sent him the list of competitors. There were 63 participants this year, ranging in age from 12 to 17. They would perform over 3 days, with the judges narrowing the field after each round until only 3 finalists remained. Marcus scrolled through the names on his tablet without much interest. Then he paused. Maya Thompson. The name was familiar. He clicked on her profile and saw the notation. Visual impairment requires assistance reaching stage. The blind girl from the meet and greet. She had actually entered the competition. Marcus felt an uncomfortable twinge of guilt. He remembered his dismissive words, the way he had told her to play for fun. At the time, he had thought he was being realistic, even kind, steering her away from a profession that would be incredibly difficult even for fully sighted pianists. But now, seeing her name on the competition roster, he wondered if he had been too harsh. She had seemed genuinely passionate about music. Maybe she did have some talent. Still, passion alone wouldn't be enough at this level of competition. These judges would be looking for technical perfection, combined with mature interpretation. The competition was fierce. He closed the tablet and pushed the thought from his mind. He would judge her fairly when the time came, just as he would judge all the other competitors. That was his job. Nothing more. Back at Mrs. Patterson's house, the final week of preparation had begun. The elderly teacher had arranged for Maya to practice on a full-sized concert grand piano at a local university. The feel and sound of a grand piano was significantly different from the upright Maya practiced on at home, and she needed to adjust. The first time Maya sat at the concert grand, she was overwhelmed by the difference. The keys were more responsive. The sustain pedal created longer resonance, and the sheer power of the instrument required her to recalibrate her entire approach. This is normal, Mrs. Patterson assured her. By competition day, you'll know this piano as well as you know your own at home. Muscle memory takes time to adjust, but it will adjust. They spent hours each day at the university, with Maya playing through her pieces, repeatedly until the new piano began to feel familiar. Mrs. Patterson invited a few of her former students to sit in the hall and listen, creating an audience so Maya could practice performing under pressure. One of these students was a young man named David Chen, who had graduated from the university's music program 2 years earlier and now taught piano at a local academy. He listened to Maya play all 3 of her competition pieces, and when she finished, he sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Patterson, he said quietly, I've never heard anything like that. She plays like she can see the music from the inside out. Mrs. Patterson smiled. That's exactly what she does. Maya doesn't see the piano or the sheet music or the audience. She sees directly into the heart of the composition. Nothing gets in her way. David approached Maya after the practice session. I just want you to know that what you're doing is remarkable. I've studied with some of the best teachers in the country, and I've never heard anyone your age play with that level of emotional maturity. Maya blushed at the compliment. Thank you. I'm really nervous about the competition though. Channel that nervousness into your performance. Let it fuel your intensity. And remember, the judges aren't just listening for perfect notes. They're listening for someone who has something to say through the music. You have plenty to say. As the competition day drew closer, Maya felt the weight of what she was attempting to do. This wasn't just about proving herself to Marcus Chen anymore. It had become about proving something to herself. About honoring her mother's memory. About showing that disability didn't define destiny. The night before the competition, Maya didn't practice. Mrs. Patterson had insisted she rest, and for once, Maya listened. She sat with her grandmother in their small living room, eating Rose's homemade soup and talking about everything except pianos and competitions. Whatever happens tomorrow, Rose said, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not because of how you'll play, but because of who you are. You could have let that man's words break you, but instead, you let them build you up. That's the mark of true strength. Maya reached across the table and found her grandmother's hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Grandma. You work so hard to give me everything I need. Watching you grow and pursue your dreams is all the payment I need, baby. That night, Maya lay in bed with her hands resting on her stomach. Her fingers unconsciously moving through the motions of the pieces she would play tomorrow. She thought about Marcus Chen sitting in the judge's chair, about what his face would look like when he realized who she was. But more than that, she thought about the music itself. About the way Bach's mathematics could sing. About how Debussy captured light in sound. About the raw power of Rachmaninoff's emotions. She thought about her mother, about all the hours spent at the piano transforming grief into beauty. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something new. She could feel it. The blind girl who had been told to play for fun was about to show a world-famous pianist what real music sounded like when played with absolute truth. The morning of the competition arrived with grey clouds hanging low over the city. Maya woke early, her stomach tight with anticipation. She could hear her grandmother moving around in the kitchen, preparing breakfast even though neither of them felt much like eating. Rose had taken the day off from both her jobs, something she rarely did. She had pressed Maya's navy blue dress the night before, making sure every wrinkle was smoothed out. She had polished Maya's black shoes until they gleamed. Everything was ready. Come eat something, baby, Rose called from the kitchen. You need energy for today. Maya made her way to the table, her hand trailing along the familiar wall. She managed to eat half a piece of toast and drink some orange juice before her nervous stomach refused anything more. Mrs. Patterson will meet us at the concert hall, Rose said, checking her watch. We should leave in about 30 minutes. Maya nodded, then went to the piano one last time. She didn't play anything complicated, just ran through some scales and arpeggios, letting her fingers warm up and remember what they knew. The old upright piano had served her well over the years, but today she would play on a professional concert. Grand in front of hundreds of people and a panel of judges that included one of the world's most famous pianists. Across town, Marcus Chen sat in the judges' chamber reviewing his notes. There were 5 judges total for this competition. Besides Marcus, there was Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a professor of piano at the National Conservatory. There was James Wright, conductor of the city's symphony orchestra. There was an elderly Japanese pianist named Kenji Yamamoto who had won competitions around the world in his youth. And finally, there was Catherine Morrison, a music critic whose reviews could make or break careers. They had reviewed the competition format together that morning. 63 students would perform in the first round. Each would play one piece of their choosing. The judges would narrow the field to 20 students. Those 20 would return the next day to play to pieces, and from them, 3 finalists would be selected for the final round on the 3rd day. This year's group looks promising, Dr. Rodriguez commented, flipping through the competitor files. Several students from prestigious academies, a few international participants, and some interesting wildcards. Wildcards? Catherine Morrison asked. Students from less traditional backgrounds. There's a girl here who's blind, For instance, Maya Thompson. She studies with a retired teacher, not affiliated with any academy. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't mentioned his encounter with Maya to any of his fellow judges. Now he wondered if he should recuse himself from judging her performances. But that would require explaining why. And he wasn't ready to admit that he had discouraged a young musician from pursuing her dreams. Well, James Wright said, we'll judge everyone on their performance, regardless of background. That's all that matters once they sit at the piano. The judges took their places in the front row of the concert hall. The space was beautiful, with excellent acoustics and seating for about 800 people. Today, about half the seats were filled with families, friends, teachers, and music enthusiasts who enjoyed watching young talent compete. The competitors were organized by a random draw. Maya's number was 47, meaning she would perform sometime in the afternoon of the first day. Rose and Mrs. Patterson sat in the audience, Rose's hands clasped tightly in her lap as they waited through the morning performances. The first student was a 16-year-old boy from an academy in New York. He played Liszt with impressive technical facility but little emotional depth. The second was a 14-year-old girl who tackled Chopin beautifully but made several small errors that cost her points. One by one, the students came and went, some brilliant, some adequate, some clearly overwhelmed by the pressure. Marcus watched them all with his professional eye, marking his score sheets with careful notes. He found himself becoming increasingly bored. These students were well trained certainly, but few of them showed real originality or deep musical understanding. They played the notes correctly, but rarely said anything meaningful with them. By lunch, 30 students had performed. Marcus stepped outside for fresh air, feeling the familiar emptiness that had plagued him for years. He had once been, like these young people, hungry and passionate and determined. Now he was just going through the motions, judging competitions and giving concerts, and feeling nothing. When the competition resumed after lunch, Marcus returned to his seat. The afternoon students began their performances. Number 38 played Beethoven competently but without fire. Number 41 rushed through Mozart, missing the grace and elegance the piece required. Number 45 stumbled nervously through Schubert, her hands shaking so badly she could barely finish. Then the stage assistant stepped forward and announced, "Competitor number 47, Maya Thompson, will perform Prelude and Fugue in C major by Johann Sebastian Bach." Marcus sat up straighter in his chair. Around him, the other judges leaned forward with interest. The blind girl. They had all been curious about how she would manage. A woman appeared at the side of the stage, guiding a young girl in a navy blue dress. The girl held a white cane in one hand and the woman's arm with the other. They walked slowly, carefully, until they reached the piano bench. Mrs. Patterson helped Maya sit down, adjusted the bench slightly, then whispered something in Maya's ear before stepping away. The girl sat alone at the grand piano, her hands resting quietly on her lap. Her face turned slightly toward where she knew the audience would be. In that moment of silence, before she began to play, something shifted in the concert hall. The restless energy of the audience settled into attentive stillness. Even Marcus, who had been halfway disconnected all day, found himself fully present. Watching the blind girl with dark skin and carefully braided hair preparing to play Bach, Maya took a deep breath. She lifted her hands and placed them on the keys with absolute certainty, no fumbling or searching. And then she began to play. The first notes of Bach's Prelude filled the hall, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. His breath caught in his chest. This wasn't just technically correct playing. This was Bach the way Bach should sound. Every voice in the fugue absolutely clear and distinct. Every ornament perfectly placed. Every phrase shaped with mathematical precision that somehow became poetry. Maya played like she could see the architecture of the music in 3 dimensions, like she understood not just the notes but the spaces between them. The relationships that made Bach's counterpoint so miraculous. Marcus glanced at his fellow judges. Dr. Rodriguez had her eyes closed, completely absorbed. James Wright was leaning forward, his mouth slightly open. Catherine Morrison was scribbling notes frantically on her pad. Even Kenji Yamamoto, who rarely showed emotion, had raised his eyebrows in surprise. In the audience, Rose gripped Mrs. Patterson's hand so tightly that the elderly teacher nearly cried out. Tears streamed down Rose's face as she listened to her granddaughter play. This was why they had worked so hard, why they had sacrificed so much. This moment right here, watching Maya show the world what she could do. Mrs. Patterson smiled through her own tears. She had known Maya was special from the very first lesson 6 years ago. But hearing her play in this hall, on this piano, for these judges, she realized that Maya wasn't just special. Maya was extraordinary. The prelude gave way to the fugue, and Maya navigated the complex interweaving voices with stunning clarity. Her fingers danced across the keys with complete confidence. She never hesitated, never searched for a note, never showed any sign that not being able to see the keyboard was any limitation at all. As the piece built toward its conclusion, Maya's entire body became involved in the music. She swayed slightly, not from nervousness but from feeling the rhythm and flow of the composition. Her face showed absolute concentration mixed with pure joy. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The final chord rang out and faded into silence. For a long moment, nobody moved. The audience seemed to be holding its collective breath. Even the judges sat frozen in their seats. Then the applause began. It started with one person in the back row, then spread like wildfire through the entire hall. People stood up, clapping and cheering. In all his years of judging youth competitions, Marcus had never seen an audience react this way to a first-round performance. Maya sat at the piano, her hands back in her lap, a small smile on her face. She couldn't see the standing ovation, but she could hear it, could feel it vibrating through the air, and the piano, and straight into her heart. Mrs. Patterson hurried to the stage to guide Maya back, and as they walked past the judges' table, Maya turned her head in their direction. She couldn't see Marcus Chen sitting there with tears in his eyes, but somehow she seemed to know exactly where he was. Marcus stared at his scoresheet, his pen hovering over the paper. The other judges were already marking their scores. Dr. Rodriguez gave Maya a perfect 10 in every category. James Wright did the same. Catherine Morrison was writing furiously in her notebook, probably already drafting the glowing review she would publish. Marcus looked down at his own sheet. In all his years of judging, he had never given a perfect score to a first-round performance. He believed in saving 10s for the finals, for truly transcendent moments. But this had been a transcendent moment. This blind girl had just played Bach with more understanding and feeling than most professional pianists achieved in a lifetime. She had taken a mathematical composition and made it sing. She had proven that she didn't play for fun. She played with purpose, with passion, with a gift that couldn't be taught or learned but only born into someone's soul. Marcus picked up his pen and marked all 10s across Maya's scoresheet. Then he sat back in his chair and tried to process what he had just witnessed. The girl he had dismissed 4 weeks ago had just given one of the best performances he had ever heard from any pianist, at any age, in any competition. And suddenly, Marcus understood something he had been trying to ignore for years. The emptiness he felt wasn't because he had mastered music. It was because he had stopped letting music master him. He had stopped surrendering to the art, stopped allowing himself to be vulnerable and open and true when he played. Maya Thompson was blind, but she saw music more clearly than Marcus had seen it in a decade. And in that moment, sitting in the judge's chair, watching a 13-year-old girl walk off the stage with quiet dignity and absolute confidence, Marcus Chen realized that she wasn't here to prove herself to him. She was here to remind him of everything he had forgotten about why music mattered in the first place. The judges' deliberation room buzzed with conversation after the first day of competition ended. All 63 students had performed, and now the panel had to narrow the field to 20 who would advance to the second round. Most decisions were straightforward. Some students had played beautifully and clearly deserved to advance. Others had struggled with technical difficulties or shown insufficient musical maturity. But the room kept coming back to one name. Maya Thompson was extraordinary, Dr. Rodriguez said, not for the first time. That batch was the most musically intelligent performance I've heard from someone her age, maybe from anyone at any age in this competition. Catherine Morrison nodded enthusiastically. I've already started drafting my article. That girl is going to be famous. The story alone is remarkable. A blind student from an underprivileged background showing up the academy-trained competitors, but the playing itself was genuinely world-class. We need to be careful, James Wright cautioned. Yes, she's talented, extremely talented, but we can't let her story influence our judging. We have to evaluate her purely on musical merit. That's exactly what I'm doing, Dr. Rodriguez replied firmly. Story aside, she played the best batch I heard all day. Her understanding of counterpoint, her touch, her phrasing, it was all exceptional. Kenji Yamamoto, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. In my entire career, I have heard perhaps 5 or 6 young pianists who possessed what the girl possesses. It is not just talent, it is something deeper. She hears the music from inside. This is very rare. All eyes turned to Marcus, who had been unusually quiet during the deliberations. He stared at his notes, remembering Maya's performance, remembering the way he had felt listening to her play. Marcus, Dr. Rodriguez prompted. You've been silent. What did you think? Marcus looked up at his fellow judges. He knew what he should say. He should praise Maya's technical skills while maintaining professional distance. He should avoid mentioning their previous encounter. He should judge her like any other competitor. But something about today had cracked open a place inside him that had been sealed shut for years. Watching Maya play, he had seen himself as a young pianist, back when music was everything, and fame meant nothing. He had been reminded of what it felt like to play, not for applause or acclaim, but simply because the music demanded to be played. She was brilliant, Marcus said quietly. I've judged dozens of competitions. I've heard hundreds of young pianists. What she did today was special. Not because she's blind, or because her story is inspiring, but because she played with complete honesty. There was no artifice, no showing off, no trying to impress us. She just served the music. The other judges nodded, seeming satisfied with his assessment. They continued their deliberations, and by the end of the evening, they had their list of 20 students advancing to the second round. Maya's name was at the top, unanimously selected with the highest combined score from the first day. Meanwhile, back at Rose's small house, Maya sat at the upright piano, playing through her pieces for the second round. Tomorrow she would perform 2 works, the Debussy and the Rachmaninoff. She felt good about her batch performance, but she couldn't allow herself to become overconfident. You need to rest, baby, Rose called from the kitchen. You played beautifully today. Now trust in the work you've done, just 30 more minutes. Grandma, I want to run through the Rachmaninoff one more time. Rose appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Maya Thompson, I have been listening to you play that piece for 3 weeks. You know it forwards, backwards, and inside out. Your fingers could play it in your sleep. What you need now is rest. Maya's hands stilled on the keys. What if today was a fluke? What if I can't do it again tomorrow? Rose sat down on the piano bench beside her granddaughter. Baby, what you did today wasn't a fluke. That was you being exactly who you are. And tomorrow, you'll be exactly who you are again. That's all anyone can ask for. Did you see Mr. Chun's face? When I finished playing, I couldn't see the judges from where we were sitting. But Mrs. Patterson said he looked stunned. Maya smiled. Good, I hope he realizes he was wrong about me. I think what's more important is whether you've proven something to yourself. Have you? Maya considered the question. When she had walked onto that stage this morning, she had been terrified. Her hands had trembled as Mrs. Patterson guided her to the bench. But the moment her fingers touched the piano keys, everything else had fallen away. The fear, the doubt, the need to prove anything to anyone, it had all disappeared. There had been only the music and her relationship with it. Yes, Maya said finally. I've proven to myself that I belong here. That being blind doesn't make me less of a pianist. It might even make me more of one, Because I can't rely on seeing the notes. I have to feel them. Rose kissed her granddaughter's forehead. That's my girl. Now come eat some dinner and then get to bed. Tomorrow is another big day. That night, Marcus returned to his hotel room and did something he hadn't done in years. He sat at the piano in his suite and played, not for practice or preparation, but just to play. He let his fingers wander through pieces he loved, pieces he used to play before they became part of his repertoire, before they became obligations rather than joys. He played Schubert's Impromptu in G-flat major, a piece he had loved as a student, but hadn't performed in a decade because it wasn't flashy enough for concert programs. As he played, he tried to approach the music the way Maya had approached Bach. Without ego, without agenda. Just honest communication between his soul and the keys. It felt strange at first, almost uncomfortable. He had spent so many years perfecting his technique, building walls between himself and the emotional vulnerability that real music required. But as he continued playing, something began to shift. The notes started to mean something again. The phrases began to breathe. When he finished, Marcus sat in silence, his hands resting on the keys. He thought about his career, about all the awards and accolades and international tours. He had everything a pianist could want. Everything except the thing that mattered most. A genuine connection with the music he played. A 13-year-old blind girl had reminded him of this truth. She had walked onto a stage and played with more authenticity than he had shown in years, and she had done it without being able to see the piano, the audience, or the judges who would determine her fate. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He began writing, not sure what he was trying to say, but needing to capture the thoughts swirling in his mind. Today, I heard someone play Bach the way Bach should be played, he typed. Not perfectly, though her technique was excellent. But truthfully, with complete surrender to the composition, I realized, listening to her, that I have been playing music for years without actually making music. I have been executing notes without inhabiting them. When did I lose this? How did I become so disconnected from the thing I supposedly love most? He stopped typing and stared at the words on his screen. These were thoughts he had been avoiding for a long time, questions he hadn't wanted to answer. But Maya's performance had forced them to the surface, and now he couldn't push them back down. The next morning, the second round of competition began. 20 students remained, and each would perform to pieces. The judges took their seats. In the concert hall, score sheets ready, prepared for another long day of evaluation. The performances began at 9 in the morning. A 15-year-old boy from Chicago played Beethoven and Chopin with solid technique but little imagination. A 17-year-old girl from a prestigious academy in Boston delivered polished renditions of Liszt and Brahms that impressed technically but didn't move emotionally. Maya was scheduled to perform in the afternoon. She arrived at the concert hall with Rose and Mrs. Patterson, wearing the same navy dress she had worn the day before. She seemed calmer today, more settled into what she was doing. "How do you feel?" Mrs. Patterson asked as they waited backstage. "Ready?" Maya said simply. "Yesterday, I was scared. Today, I just want to play." When her name was called, Maya walked onto the stage with Mrs. Patterson's guidance, but this time she needed less help. She had memorized the number of steps from the wing to the piano bench. She sat down, adjusted her position slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. The first piece was Debussy's Clair de Lune. From the opening notes, the hall seemed to transform. Maya played the beloved piece not as a showcase of technique, but as a painting made of sound. Each phrase floated into the next, creating an atmosphere of dreamy contemplation. The famous melody sang out with exquisite tenderness, never sentimental, but always sincere. Marcus closed his eyes and listened. He could see moonlight on water, could feel the gentle melancholy of a beautiful night. This was what Debussy had intended, this perfect balance of structure and freedom, of precision and poetry. When the Debussy ended, Maya paused for only a moment before launching into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The contrast was shocking, like moving from gentle moonlight into a thunderstorm. The powerful opening chords crashed through the hall with dramatic force. Maya attacked the piece with passionate intensity. Her whole body involved in creating the dark, brooding atmosphere the music demanded. The piece built and surged, moments of tenderness giving way to passages of almost frightening power. Maya played like someone possessed by the music, completely lost in the emotional journey the prelude described. When she reached the final crashing chords, the entire audience seemed to exhale together. Again, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Again, people rose to their feet. And again, Marcus found himself sitting in his chair, with tears in his eyes, overwhelmed by what he had just witnessed. The blind girl had done it again. She had taken two completely different pieces and played each one with absolute authenticity. She had shown range and depth and maturity that most pianists twice her age couldn't achieve. As Maya walked off the stage, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that she would be one of the 3 finalists. The only question was whether the other judges would agree, and based on the looks on their faces, he had no doubt they would. But more than that, Marcus knew something else. He needed to talk to Maya. He needed to apologize for his dismissive words 4 weeks ago. And he needed to thank her for reminding him why music mattered, because in trying to prove herself to him, she had accidentally given him an incredible gift. She had shown him what he had lost and, in doing so, had given him a path to find it again. The judges' deliberation after the second round was notably different from the first. There was less debate, more consensus. Certain students had clearly distinguished themselves, and Maya Thompson was unquestionably among them. The question isn't whether she advances to the finals, Catherine Morrison said. The question is whether she might actually win this entire competition. Dr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Her Rachmaninoff today was remarkable. I've heard professional pianists struggle with that piece's emotional demands, but she inhabited it completely, and the Debussy was like hearing the piece for the first time. We still have 18 other students to discuss, James Wright reminded them, though even he seemed distracted by what Maya had accomplished. Let's work through the list systematically. They spent 2 hours evaluating performances, debating the merits of various students, discussing technical errors versus artistic interpretation. By the end, they had reached a decision. 3 finalists would compete the next day. Maya Thompson, a 17-year-old named Kevin Park from an academy in Los Angeles, and a 16-year-old named Sofia Petrov from Moscow who had trained at one of Russia's most prestigious music schools. When the results were announced that evening, the concert hall buzzed with excitement. The finals of the Youth International Piano Competition always drew crowds. But news of the blind 13-year-old who was playing extraordinarily had spread through the local music community. Tomorrow's performance would be standing room only. In the holding area, Maya sat with Rose and Mrs. Patterson, processing the news that she had made it to the finals. Part of her was thrilled, validated, proud of what she had accomplished, but another part felt the weight of what tomorrow would mean. You're going to play against students who have had every advantage, Mrs. Patterson said gently, reading Maya's mood even though she couldn't see the girl's face. Professional training, prestigious schools, all the resources money can buy. But you have something they don't have. What's that? Maya asked. You have a pure relationship with music. You don't play to impress anyone or to advance your career. You play because the music speaks through you. That authenticity is your greatest strength. Rose squeezed her granddaughter's hand. We're already so proud of you, baby. Win or lose, tomorrow, you've shown everyone what you're capable of. You've proven that Mr. Chen was wrong. Maya was quiet for a moment, then spoke slowly. I don't think I'm doing this to prove him wrong anymore, Grandma. Somewhere along the way, this became about something else. About honoring Mum's memory. About showing myself what I can do. About serving the music the way it deserves to be served. Mrs. Patterson smiled. That's exactly the attitude you need for tomorrow. Go out there and play for the right reasons. The outcome will take care of itself. Meanwhile, Marcus had made a decision. After the announcement of the finalists, he had asked the competition organizers for Maya's contact information. They were hesitant at first, citing privacy concerns. But Marcus explained that he had met Maya previously and wished to speak with her teacher. That evening, he called Mrs. Patterson's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Marcus Chen. I'm one of the judges for the competition. I wanted to speak with you about Maya Thompson." There was a pause. "Is there a problem, Mr. Chen?" "No, no problem at all. Actually, I wanted to explain something. Maya and I met briefly 4 weeks ago, after one of my concerts. I said some things to her that I deeply regret. I was dismissive of her aspirations, and I want to apologize." Mrs. Patterson's voice turned cold. "You told her to play for fun. You implied that her blindness made a professional career impossible." "I did. And I was wrong. Watching her perform these past 2 days has been humbling. She plays with more musicality and honesty than most professionals I know. I wanted to apologize to her directly, if she's willing to hear it. Mr. Chen, Maya has worked incredibly hard to get to this point. Your words hurt her, but they also motivated her. I'm not sure she needs your apology complicating her mindset before the finals tomorrow." Marcus understood the teacher's protectiveness. "I completely respect that. But I also want you to know that regardless of what happens tomorrow, Maya has already accomplished something extraordinary. She's reminded me why I became a pianist in the first place. She's given me a gift without even knowing it." Mrs. Patterson's tone softened slightly. "I'll tell her you called. Whether she wants to speak with you is her decision. But Mr. Chen, I need to know that you'll judge her fairly tomorrow. Can you set aside your personal feelings and evaluate her performance objectively?" "I've been setting aside my personal feelings for years," Marcus said quietly. "But yes, I will judge her fairly. More than fairly, I'll judge her the way she deserves to be judged, based purely on the music she makes." After hanging up, Mrs. Patterson sat in her living room, contemplating the conversation. She had taught piano for over 4 decades and had seen many talented students come and go. But Maya was special. Maya had the kind of gift that appeared once in a generation, if that often. The girl didn't just play notes. She channeled something deeper, something that couldn't be taught in any classroom or academy. The next morning, the day of the finals, Maya woke early. She didn't practice. Mrs. Patterson had instructed her not to touch a piano until the competition. "Your hands know what to do," the teacher had said. "Now you need to let your mind rest and your spirit prepare." Maya spent the morning in quiet contemplation. She thought about her mother, about the hours they had spent together at the piano before the accident. She thought about her grandmother, who had sacrificed so much to give Maya opportunities. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, who had believed in her from the very first lesson. And she thought about Marcus Chen, the famous pianist who had dismissed her dreams. She wondered what he was thinking now, after hearing her play. Did he regret his words? Did he understand that blindness wasn't a limitation, but simply a different way of experiencing the world? The finals were scheduled for 7 in the evening. The 3 finalists would each perform one piece of their choosing, and the judges would determine the winner based on that single performance. Maya had selected Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14, the famous Moonlight Sonata. But she would perform all 3 movements, not just the well-known first movement. When Maya arrived at the concert hall with Rose and Mrs. Patterson, she could feel the energy in the building. The place was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls. Word had spread about the blind girl who played like an angel, and everyone wanted to witness what she would do in the finals. Backstage, Maya encountered the other 2 finalists. Kevin Park was practicing scales nervously in one of the warm-up rooms. Sofia Petrov sat in elegant silence, her face composed and confident. Both of them looked at Maya with a mixture of respect and competitive determination. "Good luck," Kevin said, his voice friendly but tense. "You too," Maya replied. Sofia simply nodded, her focus already on the performance ahead. The order of performance had been determined by another random draw. Sofia would play first, then Maya, and finally Kevin. Marcus took his seat with the other judges, his heart beating faster than usual. He had judged countless competitions without feeling nervous, but tonight was different. Tonight mattered in a way that transcended scores and rankings. Sophia walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. She sat at the piano with perfect posture and launched into Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody Note, a showpiece designed to display virtuosic technique. She played it brilliantly, her fingers flying across the keys. Navigating the piece's notorious difficulties with impressive skill, the audience applauded enthusiastically when she finished. The judges conferred briefly, marking their scores. It was an excellent performance, polished and technically impressive. Sophia had proven herself a formidable competitor. Then the stage assistant announced, "Our next finalist is Maya Thompson, performing Piano Sonata No. 14 in C-sharp minor. Moonlight Sonata by Ludwig van Beethoven." The audience fell silent. Mrs. Patterson guided Maya to the stage, helped her to the bench, and whispered something in her ear before stepping away. Maya sat alone at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys, her face peaceful and focused. Marcus leaned forward in his seat, barely breathing. The entire concert hall seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Maya began the famous first movement, the Adagio. The notes floated into the darkness like moonlight on water, each one placed with exquisite care. But Maya didn't play it like a famous piece that everyone knew. She played it like a confession, intimate and honest, as if sharing a secret with the audience. The movement ended, and without pause, Maya moved into the second movement, the Allegro. The change was like stepping from night into a garden, the music light and playful after the first movement's solemnity. Maya's fingers danced through the piece with grace and precision. Then came the third movement, the Presto Agitato, and the concert hall erupted with the force of her playing. This was the movement that most people never heard. The one that transformed the Moonlight Sonata from a pretty piece into a passionate statement. Maya attacked it with fierce intensity, her hands flying across the keys, the music pouring out of the piano like a storm breaking. Marcus watched her, transfixed. She was completely lost in the music, her body moving with each phrase, her face showing the emotional journey of the piece. This wasn't a girl trying to win a competition. This was an artist making art, sharing her soul with everyone in that hall. The final chords crashed through the space, and for a moment, absolute silence hung in the air. Then, the audience exploded. People leaped to their feet, shouting and applauding. Some were crying. The ovation went on for minutes, the crowd refusing to stop clapping. Maya sat at the piano, her hands folded in her lap, a small smile on her face. She couldn't see the standing ovation, but she could feel it, could hear it washing over her like waves. Mrs. Patterson came to guide her off stage, and as they passed the judges' table, Maya turned her head toward where she knew they were sitting. She couldn't see Marcus Chen, but somehow she knew he was looking at her. And Marcus was looking at her, tears streaming down his face without shame or embarrassment. Because in that moment, he understood exactly what Maya had given him. She had shown him that music wasn't about perfection or fame or technical mastery. Music was about truth, about vulnerability, about having the courage to open your heart and let the world see what was inside. The blind girl had taught the famous pianist to see again, and that gift was more incredible than either of them could have imagined. Kevin Park performed last, playing Prokofiev's Piano Sonata No. 7 with admirable technical skill and youthful energy. He was clearly talented, clearly well-trained, and he played the difficult piece without major errors. The audience applauded warmly when he finished. But everyone in the hall knew what they had just witnessed with Maya's performance was something different, something rare. The judges retired to their deliberation room. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. They all knew that this decision would be scrutinized, analyzed, and remembered. Choosing Maya would make headlines. Choosing someone else after her transcendent performance would raise questions. "Before we begin," James Wright said carefully, "I want to make sure we're all clear about our responsibility here. We judge based on musical merit, nothing else. Not story, not sympathy, not what might make good headlines, only the music." The others nodded, but Catherine Morrison spoke up. "James, I appreciate your caution, but let's be honest. Maya's performance tonight was extraordinary by any standard. This isn't about sympathy. This is about recognizing exceptional artistry. I agree, Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. I've judged this competition for 12 years. I've heard some remarkable young pianists, but what Maya did tonight was on another level entirely. The emotional depth, the technical control, the way she made that piece feel brand new even though we've all heard it 1,000 times. Kenji Yamamoto spoke quietly. She plays the way my teacher used to say all pianists should play, before such playing became rare. With complete honesty, no tricks, no showing off. Just pure service to the music. All eyes turned to Marcus. He had been sitting quietly, his hands folded on the table, processing everything he had witnessed over the past 3 days. Marcus, Dr. Rodriguez prompted. What do you think? Marcus looked up at his colleagues. I need to disclose something. Maya and I met briefly a month ago after one of my concerts. She told me she wanted to be a professional pianist, and I discouraged her. I told her to play for fun. I suggested that her blindness would make a professional career impossible. The room went silent. Catherine Morrison's eyebrows rose. That's quite an assumption to make about someone you'd just met. I know. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And watching her perform these past 3 days has been humbling. But I'm telling you this because I want to be transparent. I have personal feelings about this situation that go beyond professional judgment. Are those feelings influencing your evaluation? James Wright asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. My personal feelings make me want to give her the highest score possible to make up for my earlier dismissal. But my professional judgment, the part of me that has listened to thousands of pianists over decades, tells me she deserves the highest score because she gave the best performance. So yes, my feelings are involved, but they happen to align with objective assessment. Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I think we're all in the same position. Maya's story is compelling, but that's not why she should win. She should win because she played the best. Her Moonlight Sonata tonight was the finest performance of any piece we've heard in this entire competition. They went through the formality of discussing all 3 finalists. Sophia had been technically brilliant. Kevin had shown impressive skill, but when they took their vote, it was unanimous. Maya Thompson was the winner of the Youth International Piano Competition. The announcement was scheduled for 30 minutes after Kevin's performance. The 3 finalists were brought back on stage, standing together under the bright lights while the audience waited in anticipation. Maya stood between Sophia and Kevin, her white cane in one hand, her face calm but alert. James Wright stepped forward with a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, before we announce the winner, I want to acknowledge that all 3 of these young musicians have demonstrated exceptional talent. The decision was not easy. However, the judges were unanimous in our selection. The hall fell completely silent. Rose gripped Mrs. Patterson's hand so tightly, her knuckles went white. The winner of this year's Youth International Piano Competition is Maya Thompson. The crowd erupted. People jumped to their feet, applauding and cheering. Maya stood very still for a moment, as if she couldn't quite believe what she had heard. Then a smile spread across her face, brilliant and genuine. Sophia and Kevin both hugged her, showing the grace that good musicians demonstrate even in defeat. Kevin looked genuinely happy for her. Sophia smiled, though disappointment flickered in her eyes. Mrs. Patterson hurried onto the stage to guide Maya to the center, where James Wright waited with a trophy and an envelope containing the competition prize of $10,000. As he handed them to Maya, she held the trophy carefully, her fingers exploring its shape since she couldn't see it. Would you like to say a few words? James Wright asked, holding the microphone toward her. Maya hesitated, then nodded. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying through the hall, even though her hands trembled slightly. Thank you to the judges and everyone who organized this competition. Thank you to my grandmother, who has sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. Thank you to Mrs. Patterson, who has taught me not just how to play piano, but why to play piano. And thank you to my mum, who I know is watching from somewhere, and who first showed me that music could be home. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. 4 weeks ago, someone told me I should play piano just for fun. That my blindness would make it impossible to be a serious musician. I want to say to that person, and to anyone else who might think that way, that disability doesn't define ability. My blindness doesn't stop me from making music. If anything, it helps me hear music more clearly, because I can't be distracted by anything except the sound itself. In his seat, Marcus felt those words land in his chest like stones. She was talking about him, though she was kind enough not to name him directly. Maya continued, "But mostly, I want to say that music isn't about winning competitions or proving people wrong. Music is about truth. It's about taking what's inside you and sharing it with others in the most honest way you know how. That's what I tried to do tonight. That's what I'll keep trying to do for as long as I play." The audience applauded again, moved by her words and her grace. As Maya was guided off stage, Marcus made a decision. He needed to speak with her, not as a judge to a competitor, but as one musician to another. He found Mrs. Patterson and Maya in the backstage area, surrounded by well-wishers and people taking photographs. Marcus waited patiently until there was a break in the crowd, then approached. "Mrs. Patterson, Maya," he said quietly, "might I ha?" Mrs. Patterson's expression was guarded, protective. She looked at Maya, who tilted her head thoughtfully. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson," Maya said. "I'll talk to him." They moved to a quieter corner of the backstage area. Rose watched from a distance, ready to intervene if needed. Marcus stood in front of Maya, acutely aware that she couldn't see his face, couldn't read his expression. "Maya, I want to apologize for what I said to you a month ago. I was dismissive and presumptuous. I made assumptions about what you could or couldn't do based on your blindness, and I was completely wrong." Maya was quiet for a moment. "You hurt me that night. I went home and cried, but you also gave me something. You gave me motivation to prove you wrong. You didn't just prove me wrong. You reminded me of something I had forgotten. Watching you play these past 3 days, I remembered why I became a pianist in the first place. You play with the honesty and passion that are lost somewhere along the way. Why did you lose it?" The question was direct and unexpected. Marcus found himself answering honestly. "Success, I think. When you become famous, everyone wants something from you. They want performances, interviews, endorsements. The music becomes a product instead of a passion. And slowly, without realizing it, I stopped playing from my heart. I started playing from memory and technique, but not from my soul." Maya nodded, understanding. "That's what I heard in your concert. All the notes were perfect, but it felt empty. Like you were going through the motions." Her words should have stung, but Marcus found them liberating. Someone finally saw through his facade and named what was missing. "You're right. I have been going through the motions. But listening to you play tonight, I felt something I haven't felt in years. I wanted to go home and play piano, not because I have to, but because I need to. Because the music demands to be played." "Then you should do that," Maya said simply. "Play because you need to, not because you're supposed to. That's the only way music stays alive." Marcus smiled, struck by the wisdom in this 13-year-old girl. "I called Mrs. Patterson last night and said you had given me a gift. I want to explain what I meant. You reminded me that music isn't about perfection. It's about truth, and that's a lesson I desperately needed to learn again." Maya reached out her hand, and Marcus took it. Her grip was firm and warm. "Mr. Chen, I forgive you for what you said, and I'm glad that my playing helped you in some way. But can I ask you something? Of course, will you promise to play from your heart again? Because the world needs musicians who play with truth, not just technique. Even famous ones, maybe especially famous ones." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes again. "I promise. I'm going to cancel my next tour and take some time to remember why I love music. And when I return to performing, it will be different. I'll play the way you play, with complete honesty." "Good," Maya said with a smile. "Because you're too talented to waste your gift on empty performances." They talked for a few more minutes, and something shifted between them. The dynamic of famous pianist and aspiring student dissolved. They were simply two musicians who understood the sacred responsibility of making music, who knew that technique without heart was just noise. that perfection without passion was meaningless. When Marcus finally left the concert hall that night, he felt lighter than he had in years. The blind girl had shown him how to see. The student had taught the master, and the gift she had given him would reshape the rest of his career and, more importantly, the rest of his life. As he walked to his car, Marcus pulled out his phone and called his manager. "Cancel the next 3 months of concerts," he said. "I need time away." "Marcus, are you serious? Do you know how much money that will cost? The venues, the promoters, I don't care. Tell them I'm taking a sabbatical to reconnect with my art. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. But I'm not performing again until I can play the way I used to, the way I need to, the way music deserves." His manager sputtered protests, but Marcus hung up. He sat in his car in the parking lot, watching people stream out of the concert hall, still buzzing with excitement over what they had witnessed. Tomorrow, Maya Thompson's story would be in newspapers and music magazines. People would marvel at the blind girl who won the competition. They would write about overcoming obstacles and defying limitations. But Marcus knew the real story was deeper than that. It wasn't just about a blind girl who could play piano. It was about a young artist who understood something that most people spent their whole lives trying to learn, that music demands truth, that art requires vulnerability, and that the only way to truly play is to open your heart completely and let the world hear what's inside. That was the incredible gift Maya had for him, for everyone who heard her play, and it was a gift that would keep giving for as long as music existed in the world. 6 months passed, and the world had changed for both Maya Thompson and Marcus Chen, though in very different ways. For Maya, winning the Youth International Piano Competition had opened doors she never imagined possible. Music schools across the country reached out with scholarship offers. Performance opportunities came flooding in. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. A major record label expressed interest in producing her first album. But Maya and Rose were careful about which opportunities to accept. They didn't want the attention to overshadow the music or turn Maya into a symbol rather than a pianist. Mrs. Patterson helped them navigate the offers, always asking the same question: will this help Maya grow as a musician, or will it just make her famous? Maya continued her studies with Mrs. Patterson while taking some additional lessons at the conservatory that had offered her a full scholarship. She practiced every day, but she also made sure to spend time with her grandmother to do her schoolwork. To be a 13-year-old girl who happened to play piano beautifully rather than a piano prodigy who happened to be 13, the $10,000 prize money had been life-changing for Rose. She quit one of her 2 jobs, allowing her to spend more time with Maya and to finally catch up on rest her body desperately needed. They put most of the money in savings for Maya's future education. But they also bought a better piano for the house, a used baby grand that Mrs. Patterson had helped them find. On a Tuesday afternoon in spring, Maya sat at her new piano, working through a Mozart concerto, when the doorbell rang. Rose went to answer it and returned a moment later with surprise in her voice. "Maya, you have a visitor. It's Mr. Chen." Maya's hands stilled on the keys. She hadn't heard from Marcus since the night of the competition, though Mrs. Patterson had mentioned that he had indeed cancelled his tour and disappeared from the public eye. Music critics had speculated about his absence, with theories ranging from health problems to retirement. "Show him in, Grandma," Maya said. Marcus entered the modest living room, taking in the worn furniture, the family photographs on the walls, the new piano that dominated the small space. He looked different somehow, less polished and more real. "Hello, Maya," he said. "Thank you for seeing me. I hope I'm not interrupting your practice." "It's fine. What brings you here, Mr. Chen?" Marcus sat down on the couch at Rose's invitation. "I wanted to tell you what happened after the competition. After I talked with you that night, I went home and cancelled all my concerts for 3 months. My manager nearly had a heart attack. My publicist thought I was having a breakdown, but I needed time to remember how to play music again. And, did you?" Maya asked. "Remember how to play?" "It took time. I went back to the pieces I loved as a student, pieces I used to play just for joy before music became a career. I spent hours at the piano, Not practicing for performances, but just exploring. I made mistakes. I played badly. I had to relearn how to be vulnerable with music. Rose brought tea and cookies, setting them on the coffee table. Marcus continued his story. At first, it was painful. I realized how much I had locked away, how many walls I had built between myself and genuine feeling. But slowly, things began to shift. I started to hear music the way I used to hear it, the way you hear it. With my whole being, not just my trained fingers. That's good, Maya said simply. I'm glad you found your way back. I came here today because I wanted to thank you properly. And because I have a proposal I'd like to discuss with you and your grandmother. Maya tilted her head, curious. What kind of proposal? Marcus leaned forward, his voice carrying genuine excitement. Next month, I'm giving a concert at the city's main concert hall. It will be my first performance since taking time off. I'm going to play differently than I used to, more honestly, more from the heart. And I would like you to perform with me. The room fell silent. Rose's hand went to her chest. Maya sat very still on the piano bench. You want me to perform with you? Maya finally said. But I'm just a student. You're Marcus Chen. You're not just a student. You're a musician who understands what music should be. I want to perform Schubert's Fantasia in F minor with you. It's a four-hand piece, meant to be played by two pianists at one piano. I think it would be beautiful to show people what happens when two musicians come together, when ego disappears and only the music remains. Mrs. Patterson, who had arrived for Maya's afternoon lesson and heard the last part of the conversation, spoke from the doorway. That's a wonderful piece, Maya. It would showcase your abilities beautifully, and performing with Mr. Chen would be an incredible learning experience. Maya's mind raced. Performing with Marcus Chen in a major concert hall was an opportunity most pianists would dream of, but it also felt vulnerable and frightening. What if she made mistakes? What if people thought she was only there because of her story, not her abilities? Why me? Maya asked. You could perform with any pianist in the world. Because you taught me something I had forgotten, Marcus said quietly, and because I think we have something to say together that neither of us could say alone. You showed me that music is about truth. Now I want to show the world what truth sounds like when two musicians trust each other completely. Rose spoke up. Maya, this is your decision, baby. But remember what you told me after you won the competition. You said you wanted to keep playing from your heart, to let the music guide you. If Mr. Chen is genuine about this, it might be exactly the right thing. Maya sat quietly, her hands resting on the piano keys. She thought about how far she had come in 6 months. She thought about her mother, who had always encouraged her to take chances. She thought about the music itself, about how the Schubert Fantasia was a conversation between two pianists, a musical dialogue that required trust and vulnerability. All right, she said finally. I'll do it. When do we start rehearsing? Marcus smiled, genuine relief and happiness on his face. How about today? I'd like to hear you play through your part, and then we can start working on how we'll fit together. They spent the next 2 hours at Maya's new piano, working through the Schubert piece. At first, it was awkward. Marcus had to adjust to sharing the keyboard with someone else, to listening and responding rather than dominating. Maya had to learn to trust that Marcus would be there for his parts, to hold her tempo steady, even when she couldn't see his hands moving. But as they worked, something magical began to happen. Their playing started to blend, to weave together like a conversation. Marcus found himself listening to Maya's phrasing and adjusting his own to complement hers. Maya discovered that she could hear Marcus's breathing, could sense when he was about to enter or pull back, and could respond accordingly. Mrs. Patterson watched with tears in her eyes. This was what music was supposed to be, this meeting of souls through sound. This mutual vulnerability in service of something beautiful. The weeks of rehearsal that followed were intensive. Marcus came to Maya's house 3 times a week, and they practiced for hours. But these weren't just practice sessions. They were conversations about music, about life, about what it meant to be an artist. Marcus told Maya about his journey, about how he had risen to fame so quickly, that he never had time to develop a genuine artistic identity. He described the pressure of always having to be perfect, the way audiences expected virtuosity but didn't care about vulnerability. Maya told Marcus about losing her mother, about how the piano had become her way of staying connected to someone she could no longer touch. She explained how being blind had actually enhanced her musical perception, how she heard harmonies and voices in music that sighted people might miss because they were distracted by visual information. They talked about the music industry, about how it often valued spectacle over substance. They discussed what it meant to be successful, whether fame and money were the point, or whether artistic integrity mattered more. They debated interpretations of pieces, sometimes agreeing, sometimes respectfully disagreeing, always learning from each other. Rose watched the friendship develop between her granddaughter and the famous pianist. She saw how Marcus had changed from the dismissive man at the meet and greet to someone humble and genuinely interested in learning. She saw how Maya was learning from Marcus's professional experience while also teaching him to stay connected to his artistic truth. As the concert date approached, word spread that Marcus Chen would be performing again after his mysterious absence. When the program was announced and people learned that he would be playing a duet with Maya Thompson, the blind girl who had won the Youth International Piano Competition, tickets sold out within hours. Music critics prepared their reviews. Some were skeptical, wondering if this was a publicity stunt. Others were genuinely curious about what kind of performance would emerge from this unlikely partnership. Everyone had an opinion before hearing a single note. The night before the concert, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her hands moving through the motions of the Schubert piece, worried about everything that could go wrong. What if she lost her place? What if she couldn't match Marcus's tempo? What if people dismissed her as a charity case rather than a real musician? Around midnight, her phone rang. It was Marcus. "I know you're awake and worrying," he said. "I'm doing the same thing. But I want to tell you something. Tomorrow night, we're not going to play for the critics or the audience or anyone else. We're going to play for each other and for the music. That's all that matters. What if I make mistakes? Then you'll make mistakes. I'll probably make mistakes too. But that's okay. Perfection isn't the goal. Connection is the goal. Communication is the goal. Serving the music with complete honesty is the goal." Maya took a deep breath, feeling her anxiety eased slightly. "Thank you for calling. Thank you for teaching me to play again. See you tomorrow, Maya." The next evening, the concert hall filled with people. Rose sat in the front row, wearing her best dress, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her, proud and nervous. Music critics filled several rows, notebooks ready. But most of the audience was simply people who loved music and were curious about what they would hear. Backstage, Maya stood in her new concert dress, dark blue with elegant simplicity. Marcus wore his usual performance tuxedo. They stood together in the wings, listening to the audience settle. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya replied. "Remember, we're just two musicians having a conversation. Everything else is noise." They walked onto the stage together, Marcus guiding Maya to the piano bench where they would sit side by side. The audience applauded, and in that moment, before they began to play, Maya felt her mother's presence, her grandmother's love, and Mrs. Patterson's belief in her all surrounding her like a warm embrace. Marcus and Maya positioned their hands on the keyboard. They looked at each other, or rather, Marcus looked at Maya while Maya sensed his presence beside her. They nodded together, and Maya played the opening notes of the Schubert Fantasia. What followed was 40 minutes of music that seemed to transcend the concert hall itself. Marcus and Maya played as if they were one pianist with four hands, their parts weaving together seamlessly. When Maya had a melodic line, Marcus provided gentle accompaniment. When Marcus took the lead, Maya supported him with perfect sensitivity. They breathed together, moved together, felt the music together. The audience sat transfixed. This wasn't a famous pianist performing with a blind girl as a charitable gesture. This was to artists at the peak of their abilities, creating something beautiful together. The music soared and whispered, stormed and sighed, always honest, always vulnerable, always true. In the front row, Rose cried silently, overwhelmed by pride and love. This was her granddaughter, the girl she had raised after tragedy struck, showing the world what she could do. But more than that, this was her granddaughter fully alive, fully herself, exactly where she belonged. When the final chord faded into silence, no one moved. The audience seemed to be holding its breath, unwilling to break the spell. Then, slowly, one person began to applaud. Then another. Then the entire hall erupted in a standing ovation that went on for minutes. Marcus and Maya stood and bowed together. Then, Marcus did something unexpected. He took Maya's hand and raised it high, presenting her to the audience, making it clear that this was not his performance with a guest. This was their performance, equal partners. Two musicians who had found each other, and, in doing so, had found the heart of music itself. After the concert, in the backstage area, people crowded around them both. Critics who had come ready to be skeptical instead found themselves moved to tears. Music students asked questions, wanting to know how they had achieved such perfect synchronization. Other musicians offered praise and congratulations. But the moment Maya treasured most came when Marcus knelt down beside her and spoke quietly so only she could hear. "You saved my career tonight. More than that, you saved my relationship with music. You gave me the incredible gift of remembering why I became a pianist. I will never forget that, and I will never stop being grateful." Maya smiled. "You gave me something too. You showed me that even famous, successful people can lose their way and find it again. You showed me that it's okay to be vulnerable and imperfect. And you showed me that music is always about the connection, never about the performance." They hugged. Two pianists from completely different worlds, who had found common ground in the only place that really mattered, in the truth of the music they loved. In the months and years that followed, both Maya and Marcus continued their musical journeys. Maya went on to study at the conservatory, earning a reputation as one of the most sensitive and authentic young pianists of her generation. She never forgot where she came from, continuing to visit her grandmother every week, continuing to study with Mrs. Patterson, continuing to play with the honesty that had made her special in the first place. Marcus rebuilt his career on a new foundation. He performed less frequently, but with much greater depth. His concerts became events not because of technical fireworks, but because of emotional honesty. Critics noticed the change and wrote about his transformation, about how he had rediscovered his artistic voice. And sometimes, once or twice a year, Marcus and Maya performed together. These concerts always sold out. Not because of spectacle, but because people knew they would witness something rare. Two musicians playing with complete vulnerability and truth, reminding everyone that music wasn't about notes on a page or fingers on keys. Music was about human beings reaching across the divide between souls and touching each other in the deepest way possible. The story that had begun with dismissive words and wounded pride had transformed into something beautiful. The famous pianist who had told a blind girl to play for fun had learned that she was the one who truly understood what it meant to play with purpose. And the blind girl who had set out to prove him wrong had instead given him the incredible gift of showing him the way home. In the end, music had done what music always does when approached with honesty and love. It had healed wounds, built bridges, and reminded everyone involved that the most incredible gifts are often the ones we give each other when we dare to be completely, vulnerably, beautifully true.